Gronk, 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 gronk.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the LNUR Line podcast for LEGO Train fans. This time we're talking about landscapes for LEGO Railways. In this episode of the LNUR Line, we have quite a few members with us. We have Lewis Bird, Chris Miller, Liam Elliott,
Hello.
Matt Dawson, our usual producer.
Howdy.
We have Andrew Harvey in the background doing all of the hard work running and finding links for people to keep this all together.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly how Andrew sounds. Hey, ladies.
Oh, we should definitely leave that. I like that.
If Andrew's going to insist on not actually talking on it, we could give him a different voice every week.
We also have David Tabner of the Southern LEGO Train Club.
Hello.
But first, we're going to do a couple of news sections. So the first, in case you haven't seen it, is the Brick Train Awards, which are global awards for LEGO train builders in loads of different categories. We've got 10 different awards, and this is a joint effort between LNUR and Brick Model Railroad in the US. So we've got Best Steam Locomotive, Best Diesel, Best Electric Locomotive, Best Other to fit anything else, Best Freight and Passenger Wagons, Best TFOL Award, so that's for the teenage LEGO fans, 13 to 18 years old. Best Building, Best Individual Display, and Best Group Display, and they're all on the website at bricktrainawards.com. We've also got some LEGO Ideas trains, which Will's going to talk us through.
So I've looked through the last month's submissions of LEGO ideas for train ideas, just to try and support them, get them a bit further on than they normally are. First one I found was the Golden Spike Ceremony, which is a set that involves 2 American locos, a little bit of scenic track, and some minifigs and a camera. And it depicts the moments when the Union Pacific and Central Pacific Railroads met. That famous photograph we've all seen in 1869. It's an absolutely beautiful mock, heavily reliant on gold pieces, which might struggle, and a little bit unstandard in terms of LEGO train. So I don't know how, despite using LEGO track, I don't know how usable it would be other than the display piece. But it's it just looks beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Really nice.
At the moment, it's got 296 supporters and 420 days to go. So it's got a long way to go, but it's one that I could see doing well because it doesn't rely on rights. It looks great. It would make it be a perfect adults line train displayed. It would work quite well with the Crocodile. You know, bit of display track, couple of locos, and some minifigs.
Yeah, I really like that one.
So the next one I saw was, and this one probably won't do very well, unfortunately, just because of what it is. It's a train shed. It's just called Train Shed. It's a modern motive power depot, effectively, but it's got a lot of really nice details. It looks nice. It's an interesting color, blue with red windows and a grey roof. But it's a lot of thought gone into it. It's got proper roller doors. It's got nice roof supports. It's got a staircase to the ceiling and access to the ceiling, a big ventilation fan. It just looks really, really smart. The problem with it, of course, being it's going to be a big, expensive kit, and it's just not got the right. I suspect what will happen is, even if it somehow made it to the review stage, it's too expensive for City, and perhaps not quite specific enough for a more adult-aimed market, which is a shame.
And the problem with those shutters is the clearance on the track is on either side of the rail, one stud.
Yeah,
So...
it's very much 6 wide, if that.
Yeah.
That currently has 157 supporters and has 411 days to go. Now, the next one will be very divisive. But I feel like actually, if we were ever going to get this franchise back into LEGO, it'd be a really good way of doing it. And that is a Thomas the Tank Engine, or as they describe it in the description, a UCS level detailed model of Thomas the Tank Engine.
That is cool, though. I like that.
Yeah, it's that's got to be about 12 wide or something like that. Yeah, I think it's 12 wide. So yeah, it's got its own custom piece of track, which is a top and hat and a UCS style plaque. It's definitely not designed to roll, which is a shame.
It looks
But
like it's got mumps.
Oh, yeah, it's got a brick build face. I'm not sure how I feel about that. It's a really nice idea, but it does look a bit sort of Enid Blyton.
I think the feed works really well.
I like it. I think it's a fun idea. I think it would probably have to go through a redesign from LEGO because the proportions are a little bit off in places, but I think as a concept, it's brilliant. Of course, the basic problem is it's Thomas the Tank Engine, and LEGO don't currently have access to Thomas the Tank Engine and have shown no sign of wanting access to Thomas the Tank Engine. So my suspicion is, even if it does get to the review stage, it wouldn't get any further than that.
But it's a license to print money.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's Thomas. They're not that popular. They had the license. They let it go. Anyway, that has 505 supporters and 406 days to go, so it's not looking terrible, but it's got a long way to go. Next one is by far the most supported and almost certainly not going to happen, but I love it. It's a pneumatic steam locomotive. From the looks of it, it's based on some sort of Eastern European 282 tender loco. Big black beast. I think I look at one of the photos and calculated it was roughly 15 studs wide at the buffer beam. So it's a massive locomotive, completely powered by pneumatics. Now, it's brilliant, but there's the elephant in the room is pneumatics are no longer made by LEGO. So I can't see how, no matter how many supporters it gets, that we would get it in this guise. As well as which...
altogether?
They've not made it in years that I know of.
They have done recently, I think.
Have they?
I think they still do it, but just not in many sets.
Very rarely.
So we might. My thought is, if it gets to the review stage, what would probably happen is what if we just make it cylinder powered using electricity rather than pneumatics, which I think is doable. Might have to have a bit of a redesign at the front end, but I think it's doable. The main fundamental problem of it is otherwise, other than pneumatics, is despite coming with a bit of display track, it is not in any way, shape or form designed to run on rails. If you look at the video of it, it's quite clear that it would not run on rails because none of the wheels have flanges. And controlling it would be a nightmare because it's all in the cab, and the cab is quite enclosed. But I think it's a brilliant idea, and if it does somehow get out there, I would definitely buy one. Currently has 1,579 supporters and 580 days left to go. So that is the most hopeful one. And finally, and this one's a bit more likely in terms of ability, but probably less likely in terms of support, the powered-up train set with 3 automatic unloading train cars. It's a pretty generic American Amtrak loco for some reason, with 3 white wagons, a open coal wagon and 2 vans. And what makes it interesting is it has got power-up controlled unloading mechanisms. So each truck has its own little platform or hopper. You drive the train up to it, you press a button on your power-up, and the coal wagon empties one of its 2 coal bays. The barrel wagon has a little minifig with a wheelbarrow, push out a barrow, and the mail wagon does the same with a mail package. And by the looks of it, they can carry multiple packages each, so you can unload several times. You can't load, and I have no idea how they would achieve that if they wanted to, but it's a very fun idea, and if you're going to have somebody's idea that's not about the look of the build, pick somebody's idea that's about the mechanics of the build, and the mechanics are interesting on this. Sadly, though, only 31 supporters and 57 days left, so that one's probably not going to make the cut, which is a shame, I think.
It's a cool idea, but yeah, I think the wagons themselves, the design isn't particularly... It's not anything special. the idea and the playability is really cool.
The thing is, though, of all 5 ideas, this is the one that would sell the best.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a ready-made train set with play features, and you're not going to go, oh, well, it hasn't got a toy van and a crane, because it doesn't need a toy van and a crane.
It does need a wagon with a helicopter, though, doesn't it?
No, you can just take that from the 400 other sets I've already got one. So, yeah,
Great.
that's the 5 sets.
We're going to move on to, there's a bit more news about the Crocodile locomotive that we discussed the other episode, so Matt's going to cover that one briefly.
Yes, so a very interesting release from a Swedish shop that came out with effectively what would be the product description and a few other bits. So it has got similar photos to the ones that have already been released, but it does come with a brand new one that's more of a head-on look. So, and it's very definitely the same model, so it's pretty much a legitimate set at this point. Scheduled release date, from what I can gather, is the 2nd of July, so it's only about 2 weeks out. It measures 16 centimetre long, 16 centimetres high, 52 centimetres long, and 8 centimetres wide. And it does mention Power Up, so we previously mentioned Power Up as having some new releases. And one of those motors, 88013, is actually being specified as the motorisation for this set, along with the 88009 hub. The price listed was Swedish krona 1229, so that's been roughed out as about £100, €110, or about $100. Obviously, price depends on, exchange rate, and a big thing with US prices, the US price does include a sales tax, which some US members on, I think it was Brickset, picked up on, that it seemed to be a bit expensive until it was pointed out that the Swedish price will include, I think it's about 25% VAT, which is quite a high value, even in Europe. So obviously that will knock the price down a lot.
I mean, my first thought of 100 quid was blimey. But if it's got Power Up in it, yeah, that actually sounds like a fair price, to be honest.
Well, they're actually sold separately, but it does
give you
the option.
In which case, that is a bloody expensive loco.
Yeah, it's because I worked it out, and I think it'd take, if you're going to motorise it as well, it'd be about £170 all in.
Oh, bloody hell.
Instructions give you the option to upgrade it to Power Up, but not actually include it.
Correct. So from what I can gather, I'd imagine what they'd do is that the central body would have the hub, and then one of the ends would actually have a motor in it.
My suspicion is they power the middle bit, hence why it's not the proper wheel setup of a Crocodile. Because basically Crocodiles are like electric Garretts, but that thing has got 3 separate wheel sets. So my assumption would be they power the middle bit.
You mean the what would effectively be the inner 2 driving axles?
Yeah, like a normal just 4-wheel loco. I mean, I assume you'd power both axles, because one on its own would just slip terribly.
Yeah. But it remains to be seen.
Okay, thank you. So the main topic for this podcast episode is landscapes for LEGO Railways. I think we should probably open up the discussion straight away for this. And we do have a guest in the form of David Tabner, who's part of the Southern LEGO Train Club. So I think the first topic we could probably cover is perhaps the difference between what you would build as a display in your house and what you would build as a display for a LEGO show or a LEGO exhibition. Does anyone want to jump in?
I think one of the obvious things is if it's at home, you can build whatever you like because you're not going to move it as much. If it's a show, absolutely. You've got to build something capable of going in a car or a van and able to be split into modular pieces.
Yes.
I mean, I'd say with mine, home layouts are just, here's some track, here's some buildings, see what I can do. There is never any planning on home layout. Whereas my show layouts, well, at the moment I've only got the one, but even that, It's always planned to a certain extent. I know what I'm going to build. I know how it's going to set up. I know how it's going to tear down. Because you just don't have the time to make it up as you go along. Unlike some people in this chat.
For me, I think the biggest difference is part of it is the building style that Chris mentioned. So, home display, you have more stuff that's kind of awkward to take apart and transport, probably. But it's more the bigger thing for me is perspective. So at home, and I imagine most people who have a model railway or a Lego railway at home, unless you've got a massive space available, you build around yourself looking at the track from the middle, probably. Whereas at a show, there's a public perspective because they see it from one side or they might see it from four sides. So it's almost like you're building backwards compared to being at home.
If you're clever about it, you build it underneath.
Ugh.
I wonder how long it would take for Mr. Miller to mention.
And then you can have as much shit on top as you like.
I've always tended to build from the front back anyway. With the exception of one layout that wasn't really a layout, it was just some track around my computer desk. All of mine have been designed to be operated from the front, just because space limitations were such that I didn't have any choice in the matter.
Just a quick question for you all. As far as I'm aware, everyone's built to scale, or to what scale they like, and all the buildings are identical. Has anyone tried building something with forced perspective?
Isaac. I'm pretty certain Isaac has.
No.
So the stuff in the background is smaller.
Well, the buildings themselves, they were low relief, but what he did was because he didn't have the space to do a full road in front of them, he designed it in such a way that it looks like there was a road, but actually it's only about 4 studs.
Okay.
I'm sure I've seen online one of the American lot have done forced perspective cities though.
Yeah.
Can't remember who it was.
Because a real world counterpart for this is Disney World in Florida. The forced perspective makes the castle look really far away. So when you first enter the park, it looks really grand and in a distance. When you're walking back to the entrance, it only looks like a few strides and you're out, just because of how the forced perspective works.
So, and I think another thing at shows which affects the layout and how we build is we have what I call a safety zone. So a number of studs from the front of the display which we don't have running track on because kids will grab out with their hands, and we don't use barriers at shows. And I think I don't like the idea of using barriers because we want people to be interested and look. Part of that looking for younger kids, and sometimes the adults are just as bad, is touching.
Yeah, the adults are worse.
Yeah, they should know better, but they don't.
The adults assume that because they're adults, they won't break anything.
See, we have the exact opposite on the play out. The adults are like, "Don't touch!" It's like this is the play out. We don't like it. However, we have had an experience on the play out that has taught us an important lesson.
No masters.
Well, that too, but that wasn't the play out. I'm going to put a picture in the chat so you guys can see it. So at the last show that the play out did, which was Firsk this year, as is usually the case, we had a Hunt the minifigure, and as is starting to become a regular thing because it took a long time for people to do this, we are starting to get minifigs on our layout to be hunted. Unfortunately, as my brand spanking new locomotive was hurtling around the outside track, we realised the problem with this, and that is the kids will put their piece of paper on the track directly where they can see the minifig, causing one of my trains to go onto the paper and then find itself in several thousand pieces on the floor. So our future layout has got a station on the front, and we've designed it in such a way that there will be some black space between the front of the table and the front of the platform, the railway, where people can lean a little bit. If you look at the picture, which hopefully will be shown on the podcast later as well, the station sticks out a little bit, which forces us. And there's no scenery to match up to the point where the station is. So either side, there's a little bit of black for the kids to rest on. Is the hoped plan to try and prevent them from putting their blasted paper on our railway.
Simple but effective.
The worst thing is the poor kid at first had literally just come into the show. First thing he did was see the minifig, put his paper down, and destroy my brand new locomotive.
Oh, it was hilarious.
It was quite funny. and then Jamie was less pissed off with me about the APT after that because I'd had one happen to me as well.
Yes, quite so.
What about
quite
you,
so,
David?
yes.
What about you, David? Have you had any experiences like that at shows?
Far too many. Well, firstly, it's always the adults that do the real damage.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I've had whole buildings swiped off the layout onto the floor by adults turning round and so on. But well, the way I've tended to
To
do it is
Godzilla or something.
no, it's usually they're wearing a rucksack and they decide to do a full 180
Oh,
when they're
no.
standing by some of the layout, things like that, or they point in and can take out a roof or something. But yeah, I have a clearance on my layouts. One thing I actually do though is put a fence right along the front edge. The kids will hold on to that fence and they won't reach any further. That means the fence needs maintenance, but it stops them reaching for the trains, which is
Yeah,
rather
it's not a
useful.
bad thing.
Genius.
I'm quite a fan of having fences on layouts anyway because it's a very simple and effective way of adding some realism to a layout, which a lot of railways are missing. But
Yeah,
it can also
it adds
stop the children
separation.
damaging it. Yes.
I know we're against barriers,
Yes.
but have we tried landmines?
I'm working on it.
Parents complain.
Yeah, I think the principle is it has to be less destructive than the alternative, which is a fence. A barrier.
Well, actually, at the Brick Live shows I did, the barriers were quite useful because they were the proper sort of aluminium fence things the kids could actually climb up on and look down at the trains then. And they needed their hands to hold on to the barrier while they were standing on it. So again, they couldn't touch the trains.
So I'm never a fan of those at shows because I feel like they look quite hostile. But they are. You are right in that the kids do get up on, climb on them, and they maybe get a better view than they would do with a normal table.
I don't like hostile things. Maybe I shouldn't stand in the middle of the donut layouts anymore.
Or Jamie. But I mean, my attitude is it is a problem, but then at the end of the day, we are playing with a kid's toy at a show intended for children. So I feel like we kind of know what's coming, and we just have to accept it sometimes. I don't think that's why I'm against barriers. I just don't think it's the right attitude to have at a Lego show. Darren gets very annoyed when people put "please don't touch" signs on our layout, and I totally understand why. Because it's like it's Lego. You could put it back together. In my entire time, in the year and a half or so I've been doing Lego shows now, I have broken one piece of Lego, which I had an easy replacement for at the show. Due to, again, it was that electric flying off the table. It broke one of the bogey plates, but
Yeah,
it's a small price to pay. You know, it's
The
like
whole train goes off.
it's happened many times. We're running on about one a show at the moment, especially with the new system, the new control system on the playout, which is a lot more powerful than the old one.
On a show is a good show.
Yeah. I should
It also
say we're doing.
depends what train goes off. I mean, if it's like one of Andrew Harvey's steam locos, that's half a day to rebuild. Whereas if it's an emu,
You say that, but my A3's been destroyed twice in shows. Once because the company gave way, and once because of Pete's backside. And both times it took me half an hour to put that together. And that engine is, from a build point of view, every bit as complex and irritating as I imagine one of Andrew's is to rebuild. So it takes a long time to design them. It doesn't necessarily take that long to put them back together. Just don't do it when you're on 3 hours sleep and you could really do with murdering the person who did it.
Okay, I think we've covered that nicely. So, what about interactivity in display? So, we've already talked a bit about the playout, which is the LNUR Drive Your Own Train display. So, kids come along, they can drive trains around 2 loops using a modified Scalextrics controller. So, they can only go one way, but they can control the speed. And it's always really popular at shows. What other things can you see at shows? Would you want interactive elements in a display, or would you rather people just didn't touch the display at all?
Well, I have been thinking for my narrow gauge layout to have a display train gears pick it up and just examine it if they want to.
Oh, that sounds good. You'll never see it again.
So my line is very much you can push the train if it stalls. Please don't pick it up off the track because then it's a pain in the ass to put it back on the track with the steam engine. I'm a great fan of interactivity. I would like to. The next iteration of the playout's going to have a level crossing, and you can bet your bottom dollar we're going to find a way of making that interactive. In the past, we've had the 12-volt signals just randomly placed on the layout, which was a great way to keep kids busy whilst they're waiting to play on the trains themselves. And I know somebody's done a sort of 12-volt 2.0 system, one of the fan-made one, which I'm very keen in looking into because it's got the advantage of being easy to replace when it breaks. Because it will. There's 2 or 3 shows I use 12-volt. One of the signal operating panels started getting stuck on a regular basis because it's not been used in 20 years and suddenly it's getting used solidly for 2 6-hour stretches at a time. That's what happens. But I just think it adds to the fun of the layout, and if the people are enjoying your layout, you've done it right.
We've had a couple of things on our displays that I think probably the most prominent one was the display we had at Bricktastic in, I think it was 2018. We had a large 6-foot-long bridge section, and at the bottom of that we had a valley with a river, and part of that was a cave which was exposed to the public so they could see inside, and it was I think it was the cave woman and cave man figures which had just been released at the time, and we had a big yellow button that you could tap on to turn a little fire inside the cave on. Unfortunately, in the bright lighting of the exhibition hall, you couldn't really see it, but it proved quite popular, and I don't think I've really done anything like that since to that degree where there's a big yellow button they can push.
Yeah, I actually did something very like that about 10 years or so ago. It was another cave, but I had someone been Lego in there, and you could light them up. Of course, then the Yanks went and killed the real one, so I couldn't do that again.
Just repurpose it as Donald Trump hiding in his bunker.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah, really impressive. I'm sorry I haven't seen that again.
Okay, so moving on. What about scenarios that you'd find on model railways that we could use on LEGO railways? Things like the train spotter on the bridge, which we do fairly often. One of our layouts has a steam trains running today sign, which we stick outside a station. Anything else?
Something I've seen on other model railways, not so much LEGO, is someone having a crafty fag when they should be working in a factory.
Yeah, someone avoiding the foreman in the depot and stuff like that.
That's it. Usually in like a corner where if you had a quick glance at the model, you perhaps wouldn't see it.
I see now. Actually, that's not very realistic. As somebody who's worked on the track for the last 6 months or so, I can tell you for a fact that the first thing anybody who smokes does when they go on the track is light up. So you don't need them hiding. You need them stood on the track with a cigarette in their mouth. Normally stood next to the apprentice who's telling it to piss off because it stinks.
Also, things like pairs of legs sticking up behind dry stone walls, like is it Howden Marina in Last of the Summer Wine? I did have some figures on the layout for that, and a couple of bicycles propped up against the wall as well.
Of course, you've got the Amanda's normal setup for the playout minifigs, which is several sections of the red light district where people are doing all sorts of unspeakable acts. And of course, Jack's very special custom minifig with his trousers down.
Oh yes.
Once at
Disgusting.
the last year's Lincoln show, put 2 people in some trees and a man in the bushes with a camera filming them.
Yeah, I remember that.
Wow. That wasn't on the children's spotter minifigure sheet, was it?
Why not?
I mean, all you need to do is put a letter in one of their hands. O would be the obvious one.
Oh.
Thing I keep meaning to build is the couple of model railways I follow on YouTube have done it. Is to have a Michael Portillo presenting one of the Great British Railway Journeys TV shows with a camera.
I don't think Lego make any trousers that are loud enough to make a bordello.
No, actually, you just put one of the Rebel Alliance bright orange trousers on. Spot on. Obviously, there's something a lot of model railways have that I've never seen done on the Lego railways. Things like sparks coming out of an engine shed or something like that. Flickering lights representing people welding.
Yeah, that would be cool. This probably will not translate well to international listeners, but in Britain, one of our prime ministers said the naughtiest thing she'd ever done was run in a field of wheat. So we had that because we already had a farm section set up. So we had Theresa May running through a field of wheat being chased by a couple of good old British policemen for a couple of popular.
I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't have just have her getting chased by one of the T-Rexes that you always have on your layout.
That's the other cameo we need at every show is Lego dinosaurs. Always seem to appear on LNUR layouts for some reason.
Somebody needs to get a Bojo minifig and just constantly have its head in the dinosaur's mouth.
One somewhere, actually.
If it was my field, I'd have taken the combine harvester out after her.
Cart's got 4 of them.
Anything else?
A suspicious package left on the platform.
Have you seen any preserved railway, mate? They're full of suspicious packages. It stops being suspicious after a while.
No, we need a briefcase and a little miniature robot with a policeman controlling it.
You just get one of those helicopter drones that Lego loves to put in every bloody city set at the moment.
They do.
So it's another thing we've had on the layout, and I've seen on quite a few Lego railway layouts as well as real model railway layouts, is the TARDIS and the Doctor or some Daleks always seem to be.
Well, that's part of the playout standard scenery. So yeah, we always have something like that. Normally, have him chased by
I've got a whole type of
Daleks.
Cybermen I use as well.
Yeah, those ended up everywhere.
I think once the novelty of watching trains round and round wears off, which I don't know why, but children do get bored of that eventually. Having loads of superhero figures and sci-fi figures all over the layout really helps.
Yes,
a bit harder and appreciate all of our hard work building it. Damn it!
That's something I've discovered in the playout. You put all those beautiful modular buildings that we used to put on the playout out, and the adults are like, oh, those are very nice. And you can buy those. Oh, that's very nice. And then they walk off. And then the kids spend half an hour looking at the 30,000 bloody Marvel characters that we put on there. The best one, the most fun bit actually, is when you put something like the Tron Legacy light bike on there, and a kid who's literally 5 years old goes, Tron Legacy! And you're like, holy crap, you've educated that kid well. But no, it does actually, especially with the kids, if you put their favourite characters in interesting poses, they will spend longer looking at your layout. Even if you don't know where the character is, if you have a minifig and you just put it down doing something interesting, they'll be fascinated by it. I had a businesswoman minifig, which I bought off a stall secondhand for about £1 because I thought it looked like a businesswoman. I thought that'd be nice to put on the layout. 2 shows later, this kid goes, "Oh, it's that person from Ninjago." I'm like, "Is it?" So. Maybe, I don't know.
Kids are better than us usually at figuring out which figures are which these days.
I have heard people go, "Why is the Ninjago lady fighting a Ghostbuster?"
Okay, I think that was pretty good. We can move on. The final kind of prompt for this session, I guess, is the best Lego model railways that you've seen. And I am definitely going to start with this one because there are so many. And I think videos of things like Penlurg and Texas Brick Railroad, the guys in Australia who are, I think there's something like Victorian L gauge, aren't they?
Yeah, Melbourne LEGO Train Club.
There's two of
Melbourne
them.
LEGO Train Club as well, yeah.
Yeah, there's two of them. But I think they're quite similar memberships because you often see very similar looking things on both layouts.
So some of those, I think the landscaping and the sort of farmscapes and all of the little details that they put into things. I think it was the Australian guys had a bridge scene with a kid standing on the riverbank with a remote control, and they had done through magnets being motorized and spun round. They had a little model boat on the river going around in a circle, which was
that was them. I
Yeah.
remember seeing that convention.
absolutely brilliant. So I guess to open this up, what is the best thing you've seen on a model railway display, a Lego model railway display, preferably, in a show either on videos or in person?
I have to say that the thing that springs to mind most of shows that I've been to, because if I'm brutally honest, in this country we are not on the standard of the Americans or the Australians yet. The railway that's stuck in my mind more than anybody else's is actually David's quote-unquote narrow gauge railway using standard Lego track. And that's mostly because it was different and done well. It's like, just like...
Thanks.
Yeah, well, yeah, but it's nice to see. It's like,
cool,
oh yeah, I didn't think of that. That's really cool.
I think Ian Scott has some narrow gauge locos built to that scale as well.
I don't think I've seen those.
I think we'd be very remiss if we didn't mention Michael Gale's layout. So I think he was British born, but he lives in Canada, definitely North America. And he has an absolutely stunning layout, which we'll put a link up to in the comments for the podcast.
That's the first time I realised you could do a railway, a Lego railway that looks like a real railway.
It is. The landscaping superb. It's over multiple levels. I think he's got lighting in for the signals. The carriages and the locos are all lit as well. It really makes a difference. It's absolutely brilliant.
When you're on the topic of the old guard, where do you guys stand on Carl Greatrix's layout? The one that's effectively a model railway with Lego track running through it.
I love that. I think that's a brilliant medley of Lego and proper model railroading. I'm turning American. Model railway techniques.
Yeah, I love the result. Much like a lot of his methods, I'm not very keen on how he's achieved the result. I mean, if you want to model railway, there is so many avenues to model railway. But then again, also, I read an interview Michael Gale made once, and he was saying I think partly inspired by Carl's railway, and having the same reaction I did, not being entirely happy about it not being made out of Lego. He decided to want to make his entirely out of Lego, and the cost was astronomical, which makes sense because model railway scenery is cheap. It's incredibly cheap. Lego scenery is exactly as expensive as Lego trains because it's all the same bricks, and you need more of it.
I do like that, and there was. I think it's been years since I've looked on Brickshelf, but there was another layout, and I'll see if I can find it and add it to the links, which was a hybrid model railway and Lego layout again, and that might have been a 12-volt layout instead, possibly. Another excellent layout I came across again recently. I went back and looked at the old Brick Rails magazines, which are now archived on the Brick Model Railroader website. And the first issue of that has a New York-based Lego railway layout, which is really nice. And I'm sure there's a lot of other inspiration in those. It was a New York-based, New York City-based layouts. So it's multi-level, and they had a kind of mainline freight loop. And then they also had some sort of passenger cars.
I didn't have like the overhead metro system.
No, it was a ground level, more like a tram system.
Did it have an underground?
No, nobody does underground.
Ugh,
No.
rubbish.
Never heard of Underground
Worst
Railways.
New York layout I've ever seen. And I haven't even seen it.
I've been doing underground more than most of you have been in the hobby.
Yeah, but yours
Oh,
is all
good man.
overground.
Not all of it.
You've been doing overground.
Good man. I told
you
you
seen
we
it?
should have put him in the
Chris,
chat.
have you seen his layout? It's all overground.
If you look, most of the underground is actually overground by mileage.
It is. Yeah.
Don't tell
Fine.
Chris that, he'll have a heart attack.
Mine isn't.
I don't know, the only time I've seen you display your underground layout, most of it seemed to be above ground.
Well, if I displayed it underground, you wouldn't see it. So
No, I'm talking about Chris's. To my knowledge, have you displayed your stations at anything other than Sheffield, Chris?
No, my first show was, funnily enough, was the first to be cancelled because of the COVID.
Because you'd applied, that's why.
Yeah, saved at the last there.
David, would you like to talk us through your underground layouts since we've mentioned it? Because since you're a guest here, it would be quite nice to hear about that, and I'm sure we can find some pictures of it as well and add those.
Yep. Well, it was about 2004, 2005 when I got into the idea of building London Underground in Lego. I wasn't the first. John Reynolds did kind of almost the prototypical tube train design and basically the basic build style. He left the hobby years ago. I'm not the only one to do it, of course. Mandy and Andy on Facebook, on Lego Rail, he does it.
Yeah, they're great.
You've got Ben Apps as well. Yeah, there's a few odd ones. Hugh Millington's done a tube train. Stuart Crawshaw's done one. I mean, it's quite widely done now, but back in the early days, it was a case if you could pick a topic and no one else had done it before, which was kind of nice.
Much easier.
Yeah,
That's how mine started, funnily enough.
yeah. So over the years, of course, I've been taking it to shows and that, and one of the big ones for that is going to the London Transport Museum depot, where they have an annual model show in amongst the preserved tube trains there.
That would be really cool.
Now that should have been next month, but for COVID. And usually it's me and Ben Apps there, and Mandy and Andy on Facebook was going to be coming this year because he's also.
He's got some great builds.
Yeah, a little bit of customization, a lot of stickers, but it basically shows what you can do with the Lego parts catalogue these days. Because most of my designs were built 10 years ago, and hardly any curved slopes or such. Which, of course, with tube trains, that's kind of more of a critical thing.
Ever fancy rebuilding the original models or
I should,
using
but
your
the
art?
thing is, I'd have to rebuild them all because I couldn't just rebuild one because then it
True,
wouldn't go with the rest.
I think it adds a charm to yours, leaving it with the squared off, rounded edges.
Yeah.
In this photo we've got the closest train, is that like a 1929 stock or something like that? Brown door on the front.
Yeah, that's the standard stock.
So that reminds me an awful lot of the stuff they had in the Isle of Wight until the late 80s.
Yep, same thing. The standards were from 1922 to 1934. Whole load of stocks that looked exactly the same and were interchangeable. So that they shoved them over from the underground onto the island line there. And
so
you've got
the stuff they're running now is, I think, 39 stock, and the stuff they had before, 38, sorry. The stuff before was something like 1929. It was only a decade in it. They're like, look at this new train. It's like, it's only a decade younger.
Yeah, that was it. But it was what was coming surplus at that time.
Yeah.
And funny enough, they're actually changing the trains again shortly on the island line. They're
Good,
going
because
to
they're
be
looking...
Yeah, they're going to bring the old District Line D stock, given diesel motors going over there. So they're going to lose the electric traction effectively with the third rail that they converted the tube trains to. Partially because the infrastructure is so short over there. They get less than 50% power most of the time.
I say, having seen some photographs of the stock that's running there, it's looking really shabby.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been criticisms of the Metro that I work on that the trains are 40 years old, but they've done a good job of keeping them looking like they're all right, even if mechanically they're shot. But oh boy, the Island Line looks absolutely terrible. They're dilapidated over there.
Oh yeah, it's I mean, as bad as the East London line was in the old days, as the dumping place for tube stocks and so on, this is back and beyond. There's almost no money over there. And they haven't spent anything on the infrastructure for ages, so the ride is really bad. There's almost no power on certain sections, so they can only creep along. And yeah, so hopefully the move over to the D stock with power packs fitted underneath it will actually have them a decent railway. And there's plans to rebuild part of that line back beyond where they've stopped at Shanklin down through the tunnel to Ventnor, right at the bottom end of the island now. So
because that was in the day, that was an amazing station. Literally coming through a tunnel through a cliff to get to it.
Yep, I mean the tunnel's in good nick from what I hear, but there's an industrial estate where the station was, so I don't know what they're going to do with that.
Well, you don't need as big a station if you've just got a short underground train going there and back.
No, I think there was a turntable there in the steam days.
Hey, do we have any more inspirational layouts? Anything that you remember looking at?
The better displays I've seen is one of Corfe Castle on the Swanage line in Lego. And that's actually been to exhibitions like that.
That's Carl Greatrix's, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's his hybrid model railway Lego display.
It is amazing.
Yeah, bear in mind he cuts and glues as well.
Yeah, that's the problem with Carl Greatrix. Everything he does is amazing. I just feel a little bit dirty for appreciating it.
I think he should be shunned from the community.
I don't think he's particularly active in building trains these days.
Judging by his Flickr, he's shunned himself anyway, so I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay.
He hasn't posted anything on there in ages.
Oh.
I think his Deltic design is really nice, and I think that's what Jack based his on when he built a Class 55.
As for my real favourite layout that isn't my own, jokes aside, the main LNUR one we all do for the simple fact that we all put our own things on it and have a mix.
Yeah,
might be nice.
That's a good one. Yeah.
And how we can have anything from 18 whenever steam trains were invented that people don't care about, all the way up to modern diesels and electrics, and it all works.
I still think my favourite train on there we've ever run on that layout was the two grossly out of scale A3s pulling every coach we could find.
Oh, that's was that Shildon?
Just how annoyed Pete was at the time.
That was Shildon, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No drifting, because that annoys Pete. Don't drift.
I mean, in all fairness to Isaac's A3, one of those engines was doing a lot more work than the other. But yeah, it was very funny.
It was. It was like a Mark 1 coach, Mark 2 coach, Glasgow Underground coach, Mark 2 coach,
London
Underground coach.
I'm sure we've got a video of that somewhere we can stick it.
We do have a video.
I think Isaac had he didn't get the full train, but I think he had about 5 seconds of the two locos and just coaches behind them.
Doing the wheel spins.
No, unfortunately, I don't want to say fix the A3 because I liked the wheel spin, but I'd had to do some work on the A3 that had kind of negated the wheel spin by that point, which was a shame, but it also was more reliable.
Oh dear.
While we're talking about really good layouts, there's one I always find inspiring when she puts pictures up. Varda Ferres. I think she's on LEGO Train fan club side.
Oh yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, her German, or is it Austrian or Swiss Alpine
She's Swiss.
outdoor layout. Yeah, well, it's sort of same range of mountains, just depends which side you're on. But yeah, some of the shots you see that she takes when she photographs a viaduct or something, but with the angle up to see the mountains in the background, the real mountains. And
yeah, she's clearly on the side of a hill, and it really works.
I think hopefully one day we'll get her on the podcast. She is on the guest list to try and invite, and I'm sure she'll come along and chat with us for a bit.
The other one I think that's awesome. We kind of half mentioned them already. The Australian guys, Melbourne LEGO Train Club, because their layout is at Flickvention every January is enormous. and it's a collaborative effort of like 40 people together.
Are they the ones that do the narrow gauge as well, or is that the other Australian
That's
company?
That's
some of them.
Victorian.
Some of them. Well, there's 2 different narrow gauge systems there, but I think the best one is the Puffing Billy narrow gauge that Alexander McCook and Tony Davey do.
Absolutely superb.
Yeah, that one sometimes is its own layout, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's all power functions as well, so it's all self-propelled and actually works.
I cannot get my head around how any of that works. It just looks amazing.
And it's all real Lego as well, so that there's no 3D printed track or anything there. Yeah,
God forbid, who would use that? It is cool, and particularly because they haven't modified anything, and they've got working points, narrow gauge points.
Yeah.
It is amazing. Do we have any more we want to tag in before we move on?
Looking back in time, the layouts that inspired me were the original British collaborative lot, the NBLTC, when they actually put their collaborative standard layouts together. But I mean, that was a long time ago now. But it showed what you could do in Lego, and they were doing it almost to a model railway standard as well. But I mean, well, some of those guys, like Hugh Millington and so on, are still in the hobby, but about half of them have gone now, which is kind of a pity.
I presume that's Northern Brickworks.
No, it's North British LEGO Train Club, which is,
okay.
Yeah, it's ancient. Kind of an offshot into GWLTC, and they had the first shows at the Steam Museum in Swindon back, I think, 2004 or something. It didn't become a big show until 2007. But the first shows was just them with their collaborative layout beside the castle loco.
Well, that's kind of how Shildon Brick Show started. We took, even in the days before LNUR, I took one of my railway displays to the Shildon model railway display at the museum.
Yeah.
And then we got invited back to do a full Lego show. And now it would have been in its 5th year this November, but whether it goes ahead or not is possibly unlikely. I think a lot of shows seem to have developed from a couple of people displaying in a museum to lots of people displaying in a museum, but it starts with trains. That's the important thing.
Yep.
And never spaceships.
Never spaceships. Oh, actually, having said that, Shildon Brick Show, we did do one of our early displays was a cabinet exhibition based on Lego space sets. Okay, great. Do we have any more for that?
Well, actually, while we're on to more sort of show side, I just mentioned National Space Centre, Leicester. That actually started out as a space-only event, and then became a general event. And now actually we do have quite a lot of trains there.
Taking over with the trains slowly, hopefully. A couple of us were there this year as well. And you had your narrow gauge, and also, what's the largest station called? Is it based on Euston, the Brixton?
I can't remember what I called it. I had the giant big tan thing, the facade.
Yeah,
there.
That was the one. Yeah, I'm sure we'll find some photos to share of that anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a nice time to wrap up, and we're going to move on to Wagon of the podcast as well, and Chris is going to do the intro for this one.
So this is William's Wagon of the podcast, and it's his Nigel Mansell coaches.
Thank you, Chris. So, a while ago, despite the evidence to the contrary with my current roster of locomotives and rolling stock, I am at heart a Southern Railway man, and I always will be. Thank you. I decided I need to finally actually produce something from the Southern. Not quite feeling the inspiration to build a loco yet, I decided to go for coaches. Now, funnily enough, the inspiration for these coaches came from somebody we've been talking about earlier in the podcast, Carl Greatrix. He'd built a very, very nice Great Western Clear Story wagon, coach way back when. I was just looking at the way he'd done the sides, and it kind of just, when you just see something, you think, oh, that's a good idea. So I started basically looking at the photograph of the underside of his chassis, which is 3 plates wide with stuff bolted on the sides, which I'd never done before. and started on Studio, just building outwards and seeing what I could achieve. If hopefully there'll be a link provided on the description of this podcast. I have a sort of blow-by-blow account of me building it in Studio on my Flickr page. There's a album specifically for the Maunsell coaches. Gives you a preview of what they should look like, including examples of the Hornby coaches. And then I, admittedly, sort of about a third of the way through the design process, started doing renders of it to show off what it looked like. So yeah, I think it took about 2 days of heavy design work to get the majority of it done. Initially, actually, one of the photographs that have been work in progress photographs is from an earlier iteration of the model. I did get it almost complete, put it next to a render of one of my Pullmans, and thought, oh, this doesn't look very good. It looked great, as is often the case when you're designing something on its own. It looked absolutely great. So you put it next to something else, and it was too tall. The frames were massive, and I had to have a serious rethink about it. Like first, I put some of the L-shaped panels as footboards on it, and there's a whole stud's worth of black space between that and the sides of the coach. Which looked awful. So I tried flipping it around, still wasn't happy with it. And then it came up with a crazy idea of having it half a stud offset from everything else in the coach. And there's another photograph on my Flickr of the construction method required to, in the space of about one brick, have the one stud offset panels sliding underneath the ends of the slopes of the side of the coach, which took me probably as long as the rest of the coach to design, and was an absolute headache of Lego mathematics to work out, and it's why they are so astonishingly expensive, because the parts used in that is massive. But the result was fantastic. I'm really happy with the results, because you've got this very thin frame line, what you would expect from effectively, it's about one plate thick frame with footboards underneath it, which looks really, really good. And that also allowed me to lower the coach enough to be at the right height to work with the rest of my stock. So that really fixed the coach in one fell swoop, which is often the case when you build. It looks terrible until you fix one thing, and then all of a sudden it is spot on.
No customized parts in it?
Apart from trimmed tubes to make the underframe, no, not a single customized part. Probably will do some tape lining one day, but yeah, it's still not perfect. There's a couple of minor issues with the underframe. Pretty much every time I put it on the track, I have to reattach the brake reservoirs because they don't stay on very well, and I need to do something about the clips that hold the underframe detail on, because they don't actually stud in place properly. Also, the bogies. Well, no, I think what I have to do is what I did with the Pullman, which is just put a plate on top of it. I didn't want to do that because I thought it'd be obvious, and then I looked at my Pullmans and went, actually, it wasn't obvious on the Pullmans. Why would it be bloody obvious on this? It's underframe detail. You can't see it unless you're looking at it closely. I need to do something about the way the bogies are held on, because they have an annoying habit of falling off when you pick it off the track at the moment. But it's actually more stable than the Pullmans and doesn't drag any heavier, despite the fact that it is a decidedly heavier coach than the Pullmans.
Thank you. We'll put some images of that up into the YouTube.
Yes, I'll provide some photographs as well to go with the renders.
I think Andrew's beat you to it and found some already, but
there's renders, yeah.
He's our new unelected
chat master.
He's really good at following up links for people in the chat. Right. So we're nearly at the end of the podcast. We've got a couple more bits to do, and we nearly forgot a really important feature, which seems to become a recurring regular feature on the podcast, which is Chris's regular update of the LEGO Ideas Berlin subway train. So, Chris, off you go.
Yes. So, the Berlin subway train. Last week, it had 51 supporters, I believe. This week, with 25 days left, it has a whopping 55 supporters. Watch this space.
All right, who followed it on here? Who did that?
Me, I did.
Where's the other 3 follows come from?
But watch this space, because I bet William's Lego collection that by the end of the 25 days it'll have 10,000 supporters.
I bet Chris's Lego collection, plus all of my Lego collection that he'll inadvertently have won, that it won't.
Thank you. And the last slot we've got. Usually we do an interview with a specific builder, but because the Brick Train Awards have just announced entries are open, we're going to have a group discussion on the Brick Train Awards and what categories people are feeling like they might enter and what we're expecting out of them. So we can probably unmute people who want to chat. So if Andrew fancies joining us, David, if you fancy joining us on this as well, we'll post up a link if we have not done so already. So there are 10 categories, which we mentioned briefly at the start. There's best loco for electric, diesel, steam, and other locomotive. There's best freight and passenger wagon. There's best group display, best individual display, best building or structure, and also best teenage fan of Lego award, TFOL award. So I guess we can rule that one out. So there are 9 to pick from. And we are going to start with, who shall I pick on first? I reckon Matt.
Hey.
I already know your answer because we've already done a special episode podcast for the Brick Train Awards.
Is it something American?
Of course.
Well, it's worse. It's tell them, Matt.
Is it underground?
That bad.
No, it's not. Right, what I was going to do was that it's pretty much almost finished at this point. It's actually the depending on which railroad you do it for, either the Reading or the Central of New Jersey Camelback loco. So it's a bit of a different design to normal locos. Basically, as a way of increasing visibility for the engineer or driver, depending on what you'd call them, they actually shifted the cab to the centre of the boiler above it and slightly above it, so it sort of encapsulates the boiler slightly, and it's actually above the driving wheel, so you get a better visibility, but at the cost of that, at high speed and with some of the possibly maintenance and manufacturing issues, they had the tendency to actually throw their motion up into the cab and actually kill the engineer, which is apparently a problem at high speed. Apparently lower speed was okay. It's just obviously as a commuter loco, they were designed to go up, or suggested to go at reasonably high speed to do the quick stops between stations, and obviously the reliability issues which became apparent later on, meant that the Camelback design was reasonably short-lived. So it's all both use in both freight locos and passenger. Passenger seem to die off a bit quicker, and even some of the standard Camelbacks, which were normally a 460, were actually rebuilt into standard outlook, so the cab was actually at the back, and that sort of stuff. So my model is actually, as a standard 8 wide, I've actually had to go for 10 for the cylinders, purely because the way the motion is and the fact the motion actually would foul the leading drive wheel. So I've had to
that answers my only question on this model, which is, will it fit on the standard LNUR layout within the loading gauge we have? It doesn't sound like it's going to fit.
Yeah, considering most of the ones that do fit don't fit.
I'm about to say the 8 wide coaches I built barely fit, so this definitely won't. And the whole reason I've had to go for 8 wide is that it's purely because of the valve gear. If it wasn't for the valve gear, and I didn't want the connection rod between the cylinders and the driving axles, I could actually thin it down to about 8 without any issue. But the trouble is that to get that extra motion in and have it look a bit more realistic, I've had to go for 10 wide for the cylinders. It's not the first time somebody building an 8 wide has had to go to 10 wide for cylinders. I believe Kale has had to do that for his Suburban tank, and it's not something I'm very proud of. I did try and keep it to 9 wide, but again, you've got issues with the motion, and going to 10 isn't the best in terms of scale, but it is in terms of functionality, and it's really easy just to go that little extra and just make it a bit better. I mean, 9 wide is something a lot of builders seem to go to, so they seem to go to that extra stud. I mean, it's only half stud on the side of a model, but it really adds a lot of extra space for valve gear and little bits and pieces. It's in regards to completion, it's pretty much complete as is. There's still a few bits and pieces I want to do, mainly to do with electronics. So although it's all connected, it all works, and I've tested it a few times. The main thing that really it's missing is the lights. So although it's motorised and the wheels turn, I do need to do something with the electric so that there's actually a function so that you can toggle another one of the outputs, so it's either got a headlight or a backup light. And obviously that'll just give it a little bit of extra functionality, a little bit of realism. So when it's at a station, for example, I can dim the headlight as per, I think it's Rule 6 in the US Railroad Operating Manual. So you dim your headlights when you're stationary, and it's just little bits like that where it's something that will require custom electronics, which is possibly towards skirting the rules a bit and possibly going into the phrase of being an unofficial component, but it's that little bit extra that just adds that final bit of detail and realism from that aspect. But aside from that, it's pretty much complete. There's still the only other real bit that needs attention is the cab backhead. So it's got two cabs, but what would be the engineer's or driver's cab is pretty much just full boiler anyway, and you wouldn't actually see much. But the rear cab, which is the what we'd call the fireman's area, the Americans would call the stoker, has got to have a bit more detail added, obviously because it's a barren backhead at the moment. But once I've added some details to that, it should be ready to submit.
Cool. Well, you have until the 10th of July, so you should have time, hopefully. Who am I going to pick on next? I am going to pick on Will. So what would you enter in the awards? You can enter multiple categories. You can enter up to 3 models per category.
I mean, I wouldn't enter more than 1 per category just because I don't really think that my standard is that good. But I mean, obviously, now the A3 is finally finished, complete with lining and everything, it would have to be entered in locos because I'm really bloody happy with that. I'm torn between the Maunsells and the Pullmans for the rolling stuff. The coach, I can't remember what the categories are called. I had it on the computer until 2 seconds ago. So yeah, so the passenger wagon. I would enter one or the other out of the Maunsells and the Pullmans. Probably the Pullmans because they're complete, whereas the Maunsells, there's still a little bit of tinkering I'd like to do with them, and I'd like to have more than one before officially declaring it done. Trucks, without a shadow of a doubt, I would do the tanker, but I would like again to hopefully get a second.
Design.
Sorry.
It's a really nice design.
Yeah, I'd need to get a second tanker built with better colours so you can see it better, because the black's nice and in the brick it looks great, but on photographs it's kind of just a lump of black plastic, which isn't ideal. The rest of it, I don't feel like the playout is ready, and obviously that'd be me and Darren the playout, but I don't feel like the playout's ready to be put in for individual Lego display yet, or group Lego display. Sorry. Maybe the engine shed for infrastructure, because that's basically finished now. But I haven't totally decided yet. I don't want to just put everything I've ever built on there, because I don't see the point in flooding a thing with my things.
Okay, fair enough. I wonder. We'll go with Chris next. I'm sure he has an opinion.
Do you have an opinion?
I know it's relatively unknown, but I'm sure you could muster one for this.
Well, I would have entered my Glasgow Underground trains, but there doesn't appear to be an underground category.
There is an electric category which includes multiple units.
Well, I wouldn't enter my Glasgow Underground one, because I think it'd be a bit unfair. Because I'd win. But the one I would enter would be into the steam locomotive model category, and it would be my fireless boots number 2.
Ooh, okay.
Ooh. Oh, indeed.
As a filer, so wouldn't it come under the other category?
It depends on what
Steam
is
engine.
used to generate. Yeah, it's still a steam engine, even though the steam is not made on board, I suppose.
No, it's got a
It's in
steam.
a tank, isn't it?
It has a steam reservoir, which they would fill to 160 psi. And apparently, on one charge, it could run for several hours. Whether it could or not, I don't know. I wasn't there.
Cool. Okay. Who else can I pick on? David, are you back on audio? Have you managed to get back on?
No, I don't enter competitions. I never win anything, so I've gotten used to saying, "Oh, competitions are for other people." I just build models for the sake of building them and run them.
That's
I mean,
part of the pleasure of the
don't-
hobby, isn't it? You don't have to build for a competition. You build for your own enjoyment.
Yeah, and well, I'm not an advanced builder really. I mean, half my techniques are stuff back from the 90s. If you look at my models,
I think that's
forget about all the curved slopes, and then I just build blocky.
I think that's quite it's kind of an
completely-
iconic style, because a lot of models these days are quite they almost don't look like Lego, because you can take advantage of all the parts. So it's quite a lot of builders still build sort of studs out, and it's quite a nice look. But if you don't enter competitions, you don't enter competitions.
Yep. The other thing is, I go to some of the biggest Lego shows, like Scarebeck and, of course, Bookbench in Australia and that. And I see some of the best models that I've done in the world, and I just know I can't compete with that. So I don't even bother trying.
In fact, I think I won't say which model it is, but I think we've already had quite a few entries because we've opened them up already by email, and you can also compete by Google form. One of the entries was in the other loco category, and I'm pretty sure I saw that at the Portuguese Lego Fan Weekend the other year.
Yeah.
Probably not last year, but the year before, one of the larger scale locos.
The English Electric, the orange one.
Not that one, but another one of a similar scale, I think. There are certainly some impressive models coming in.
Nobody's putting in that massive Flying Scotsman and Pullman combo, because none of us could have a chance against that.
I think
Well, the one that Greatrix did, that my brother helped design.
I think the A3 is great. I question some of the interior design elements of the Pullman, but having not been inside a Pullman, I might be wrong on that.
Yeah, they didn't actually know what it was like.
No, I thought not.
They were building for a very last minute deadline, from what I hear.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
That sounds normal. Who else do we have to pick on? I think everybody else is left, because Lewis didn't stay very long.
What about Mr. Carter?
Oh, I don't want to hear about his rubbish.
Oh.
I mean, he's got one layout that he could definitely put in there.
I can't enter because I'm a judge. Damn it. But
that's all right.
I wouldn't win anyway, so it's fine.
You would if you chose it.
We've already done this question on the award special, but I will repeat my answer, and it will be just as hilarious as it was the first time round. So I would pick the TFOL award, because that would mean I was young. But no, I think I'd probably pick
Slow clap.
individual and group displays. So individual and group displays for me is probably that. So the layout we had at show in Leicester Brickish weekend in March, just before the lockdown, was Ambridge and Paxley, which was a 18-foot long, which is quite short for Lego trains, because Lego trains tend to be quite long. That was an 18-foot long end-to-end display, and it took a bit of thinking about which loco's running next to clear a siding so you can do the next movement, and that was made quite a nice change, because most of the displays we run as LNUR are for shows, for obvious reasons, are just loops, because we can keep the trains running and it doesn't require your full attention to be driving the train, so you can interact with the public a bit more, laugh at Jamie's APT crashing, etc.
I mean, it would crash on your layout, but it wouldn't get very fast before doing it.
Yeah,
It's about the length of your layout.
Yeah, hopefully so. Yeah, so that I would probably put that in as my individual layout. I've probably got some buildings and structures that I really like, signal boxes and water towers that I'd like to put in, but I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what everybody else submits anyway. And I'm sure quality will be pretty high.
That's part of the reason why I don't want to put more than one of my things in, because I think the cream of I would only put the cream of my designs in, and I don't think I've got more than one really in most categories that would fit that top end as far as I'm concerned. And even then, like a bit like today, I don't think I'm actually going to win anything. I think there are better people out there than me. But it's like you want to at least try and be in the same ballpark as them.
Yeah, I think what will be interesting is we're judging Europe as one region, and there's obviously going to be quite a variety of rolling stock and locomotive styles in that. So it's going to be interesting. I'm judging with Enrico, who is a Dutch LEGO train builder, and he also features on the Brick Model Railroad podcast. I think he actually runs their podcast. So I think Enrico and I are probably going to have very different ideas about what a locomotive actually looks like, because most of my experience is I've been on trains in Europe, but I've grown up around model railways and heritage railways and railways in the UK, and UK does things a little bit weirdly compared to the rest of Europe a lot of the time. So it's going to be interesting seeing what people submit. I think one of the categories I'm looking forward to judging most is probably the individual display, because I think people in that category, it's going to be displays in their house which have never left their house, and they might not put photos up on Facebook or Twitter. So it might be quite a nice insight into those people who haven't quite, almost want to say, come out of the closet to the Lego community, and given it sort of come out of their shame of the adult Lego hobby and shown the world what they've built. So I think that's going to be really good.
Think of the scandal if what you and the other chap, whose name I've forgotten already, the model that you picked to win was a British train, which was then sold to the Dutch railway.
Like a Class 20, you say? Could well be. It could well be.
Or whatever they called the Gronks that they sold. NS something. With like that.
De-Gronker.
Could be. That sounds right. I'll ask Enrico next time I talk to him.
Van Gronkelnoy.
Right, and I suspect we're running way over time for the podcast as usual. And Matt loves editing, so it's fine. I think the final question we're going to go with is, I already know Chris's answer to this, is
What dare you?
What if you had an award in the Brick Train Awards named after you, what would it be for? Chris, what would the Miller Award be for?
Most catastrophic building / locomotive destruction at a show award.
I was sort of hoping you were going to say Underground Railway Award, but okay.
Too obvious. The prize that would be given would be a little statuette of me doing that thumbs up leaning pose in that.
That's a job for Will to render in studio, I think. There we go. We'll do the Miller Award as well.
That's annoying, because mine was going to be very similar.
You could do an underground one.
Mine was going to be the William Elliott Award for saying it's fine and then crashing immediately. to replicate the first APT incident. It's like, oh, it's fine, it'll go around these corners, crash!
It's a good job Jamie's left this recording already, isn't he? He's gone to bed or something.
It's okay, I will never let him forget it, so he can't never let me forget it.
What about Matt? What would the Matt Dawson Award be for?
I'd probably go for more of the inventive techniques and interesting parts use. So obviously, I wouldn't say British ones have probably going to lead on this, but obviously there's a lot of detail on some models where it's quite a lot, but in a really small space. So obviously,
Yeah.
In a Lego format, obviously you've got the complexity that you're working with Lego elements. So obviously, it's really interesting to see how some builders get around the limitations of Lego to build some really intricate and detailed designs.
I think that would be quite a nice award. I mean, most of the locomotive awards, at least, have a component of the score which is building techniques. So some of those might be accommodated depending on the judges to an extent. But particularly for me, any small locomotive model which is fully self-powered is going to be high up there in the locomotive categories.
So what you're saying is I should put the pocket rocket in?
Except that.
Boo! Literally the most reliable loco in the LNUR.
Yeah, but we
Pretty
don't
much by default.
It's not hard though.
No. Does it roll? Oh my god, it's already more reliable.
We don't want novelty trains in it.
I was going to say about Matt, I'd have thought Matt would have the Matt Dawson Editors Award for just getting the fuck on with it.
David, would you like to contribute an award, the Tabner Award?
I'd like as a unique one. What about if you have a category where the train has to be made only of parts available from the 9-volt era? Because that was the era I grew up in, like train building in,
like
a hobby in. But I mean, you could also do another one, say, for the 12-volt era, another one for the original 4.5 era as well. So get people targeted to the specific eras would be quite good.
I think one thing that we did try and be quite inclusive with the awards for Lego train builders, but one thing I feel like we have left out is the 12-volt era and prior eras as well, because they can enter their locomotives in whatever category, but compared to the usage of bricks these days and the different building techniques, realistically, is something built in that style likely to catch the judge's eye? I don't know. I quite like the 12-volt system, and I like that style of building. I think it's quite iconic. But
funny enough, I did have an idea to utilise 12-volt in a modern context. Inspired by one of the Northern Brickworks members who did a Triang era, a layout based on Triang era rolling stock. Yes. I was thinking it'd be quite fun, actually, using the 12-volt track and signals and level crossing system to replicate the Hornby 003 rail era build. So you have the nice tan-coloured track units, and you have the replica of the metal level crossing, and you have simplified, probably not 12-volt era bit specific, but simplified locos, 6-wide locos based on the famous locos that Hornby did back in the day. So you'd have an A4, a Princess, and a generic 262 tank, and a generic 040 tank, and stuff like that. And comically short coaches, or as Lego would call them, standard length coaches.
Ooh, slick burn.
Yeah. But I don't know how you could really use 12-volt pieces, 12-volt era specific pieces to do. You could do something creative, but it's just such a horrible, difficult job to guarantee that you've done it, and it's not really worth the reward. But using 12-volt in a modern context does sound fun.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of categories that we could have added, but we were trying to keep it reasonably simple for the first year, and then if it's not too much hard work, we might do it again, but we'll see.
I have a silly category that you might like.
Of course you do.
No, we won't.
Okay, I won't bother.
Best spaceship or something?
The category would be most ridiculous train. So people can build it out of, for example, parts that you just wouldn't put on a train. But the winner should be someone who just builds a plane.
I still need to build the LNUR Breakfast Express at some point, with powered by a literal kettle, which you stole that idea inadvertently, I seem to remember.
Yes, I did. And you will be copying me now, so hard luck.
Even though Carter can guarantee I had that idea about 6 months before you joined the group. Just too lazy to do anything with it.
It's a good thing it wasn't something that was going to make you loads of money.
Yeah, you're welcome to try and market that one.
I built it.
That's about all we've got for this episode of the LNUR Line podcast. Next episode, we're going to be talking about scaling Lego model trains. So don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and also on YouTube for the regular podcast updates. And that's all we've got. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye, everybody.